Welcome back, everyone, to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Dr. Zach Groeschel, and I am here with three of the most amazing people that I know in the world of education. I'm here with Peps Mccrea, Josh Goodrich, and Doug Lemov. We are going to be talking about instructional coaching today in light of the new partnership between Steplab, which we'll learn what that's all about, and Teach Like a Champion, which I've talked about so many times on this podcast. This podcast is sponsored by John Catt Educational, which brings some of the best books in education. I recently just released my book, which is called Just Tell Them, The Power of Explanations and Explicit Teaching. Go ahead and follow the links that I put in the show notes to John Catt Educational and check out their whole catalog and get yourself a copy of my book, Just Tell Them. How is everybody doing? Josh, let's start with you. Where are you calling in from?
I am speaking to you from London, England.
Sweet. And you're, I see behind you, we've got one of the two books that we're going to be talking about. You had the second. There you go. Lovely. I keep talking about your responsive coaching book. What do you do, Josh?
What do I do? Right now, I just work at Steplab. Up until this summer, I was a deputy head in a central London secondary school, but I have made the sensible decision for my work-life balance to just do one thing at a time for the first year of my life. So yeah, I work at Steplab.
Lovely. And Peps, I see for people that cannot see the video, he's got some pretty sweet shades going on right now. Peps, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hey, Zach. Hey, audience. Hey, folks. Just to be clear, like Joyce doesn't just work at Steplab. Joyce, is the founder and CEO at Steplab. He is way too humble. So important just to call out. He basically had the vision, built the whole thing, and makes it run amazingly for loads and loads of schools all around the world. I'm also dialing in from the motherland, the place where America started, I believe. Is that true? Yeah. We could debate that. Yeah. Joyce gives me the thumbs up. Agreed. I'm not sure what role Northern Ireland had to play in that. I'm from Northern Ireland. So anyway, that's a whole different history. I also work for Steplab, part-time, part of the week. And then other parts of the week, I write an email. I spend all of my Mondays just writing a single email, which some people out there will know as evidence snacks, because quite a few people get that. And then, I get to do a few other interesting projects working closely with schools, whenever I get the time. So that's me.
Lovely. And let's pass it over to Doug. Doug, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. It's nice to see you guys. I'm a little bit jealous of Pep's glamour shades that he's wearing. Which, it's a sunny day in England. You got to take them when you get them, I guess.
Yeah, I think this is basically this is our summer. Today it's coming. Make the most of it because it could be gone by 2 hours.
I love it. And Doug, if people are tuning in, they know who you are, but can you give us a little background on what you do?
Sure. I work in an organization called Teach Like a Champion, which is more or less named after the books that I write with my colleagues. We try to study high-performing teachers and understand what they do, name the things that they do so we can talk about them and build a shared vocabulary of teaching, and build a lot of that around the idea of using classroom video. The books more or less started for me when I was recovering from an MBA at the time, and I ran a bunch of sort of scatter plots to try and find where among communities of higher need, where students don't grow up on the leafy side of privilege, are there high-performing schools and classrooms. Found a bunch of them, snuck into them, stood in the back, and they were incredible, the things that the teachers did. So I tried to videotape them, because I think video is such a powerful tool in understanding and being able to copy and adapt what other people do. And so that became Teach Like a Champion. Now we focus on just training teachers and providing professional development and curriculum to teachers. So that's a little bit about me. And can I just say, among the most influential books for me are a bunch of Peps's books, especially Motivated Teaching. That's gold. Josh's book on instructional coaching is so powerful. And Zach, I am eagerly awaiting my copy of Just Tell Them. I'm waiting for the magic of Amazon to make it appear on my doorstep, but I can't wait.
The magic of Amazon brought it back 10 days just the other day too. So it's going to come earlier than it was going to come on Christmas Eve. And I think they just changed it. So That's great. I'm excited to talk to y'all about instructional video and kind of the coaching process. Um, Josh, I wanted to start with you in this interview because a lot of thinking that from your own experience working with teachers in coaching has gone into creating Steplab, which uh, people need to know what that is. It totally changed the last year and a half of my coaching, like as a user on the user end. Can you tell us kind of why you created Steplab or and with whom and how it kind of came about?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, most of it I created kind of on my own. So I have experienced the kind of challenges of getting better as a teacher from as loads of as every teacher has from multiple angles. I'm still really aware of the feeling of coming out of a great PD, of a great session and being excited, and then getting into class and like feeling it's kind of a physical sensation of like, oh, didn't change then. Or certainly at the end of the lesson, you're like, oh, nothing got better. And the frustration as a teacher from like, I'm just not improving how I want to improve. Then I kind of experienced that similar kind of feeling of failure to change or help people change when I led PD, like a bit later in my career. You know, you run a great session, then you go and pop around lessons and you're like, oh, no one's doing the thing. And I was like, and I just wanted to solve that problem. I didn't want, I had a real struggle learning to teach. I found it really difficult and parts of it were a bit depressing, to be honest. And I wanted to find solutions to that problem. I basically from going to, I had an early experience at a TLAC event, in London, like way back when. And I was like, well, modeling and rehearsal has got to be a big part of the puzzle here. And then I also found out I think from Harry Fletcher Wood initially, who's someone who works for Steplab, and we all know, about this thing called coaching, which is kind of like personalized PD, where you really focus on helping the teacher to implement. And so I wanted to do those things, and I helped a part of the team to found a new school in London, and I tried to get everyone to coach. And then I had experienced another failure, which was like, gosh, it's kind of hard to coach yourself, to help other people coach, and then to lead a coaching program. And so all of those realizations that helping teachers change is really hard to do from like every angle, I just started building out solutions to that problem. I used Teach Like a Champion and a bunch of other books to write a load of kind of action steps, like really granular coaching steps. I built a tool to support the process of coaching. I built with a guy called Ben came on board as the second Steplabber, and he helped me to actually, build proper tools. And we built a bunch of kind of data tools for leaders to help people implement a program. And then thirdly, Peps came on and he helped us make it proper and good. So that was the process. It's just like solving problems, barriers to teachers changing one by one, and adding those together and iterating them over time. And hopefully we're at a place now where we're starting to get a solution which works for schools.
It's a bit like, I always think it's a bit like learning to drive a car, right? And for some reason, we would never accept, like, basically going along to a room, being like, shown a video of somebody driving a car, and then being told to like, right, go ahead, go back to your car, and now just like, you'll be fine, you'll be better now. I mean, this doesn't work like that. That's not how the kind of human brain is able to learn stuff that is kind of performative and behavioral. And yet, for some reason, we've kind of accepted that model in the world of teaching for far too long. So this is like, it's really good, Joyce, that, basically, Doug came up with the idea, essentially, of Steplab. So you trace it right back, or give you the inspiration to Steplab, or to build Steplab, because it's like sorely needed, having spent so much time in the world of professional development. Certainly in the UK, I worked in universities for a load of time, and other organisations. Like this model of instructional coaching embedded in schools is just so refreshingly sensible.
And for people that haven't actually like seen how it works, like there's two components I think in the United States like coaches would get really, really excited about. and that is the drop-ins, and then the coaching, like what I like to think of as like the coaching cycle side of the platform. Lots of coaches are told like get into classrooms, like get in as frequently as you can, and that that it takes a bit of like courage and bravery a lot of times when you don't have like the institution behind you, and a lot of coaches are sort of not able to step in and do that. But I feel like this solves a lot of those problems and creating sort of a structure and a system to it. I'm curious, Peps, like when you came into Steplab, when you did, like what were some of the things you saw, some of the developments and the changes towards a coaching platform that could really help coaches?
Yeah. So like whenever I started, I was like, right, I get the idea of instructional coaching. Like, if, you kind of seen it in action, and once you've seen it in action, you can never go back. You can't kind of put that vision out of your head again. All of a sudden, all of the conversations that I had been having with teachers as a university mentor for many, many years, just seemed like embarrassingly inadequate. But that was only like the tip of the iceberg. And so you mentioned drop-ins, and I think like drop-ins, to begin with, I was just like, why are they here? They're just kind of taking space up on the Steplab like platform, as it were. But I have increasingly begun to understand the like massive power of drop-ins. There's such a simple thing. Essentially, a drop-in is a unannounced visit by another member of staff into a classroom to just watch a bit of teaching. It could be 5 minutes, it could be 15 minutes. And then typically afterwards, that teacher will provide a little bit of positive feedback to the teacher they've just seen. So basically like, popped into your lesson, I'll drop you an email afterwards, or on Steplab using the platform, send you a message and basically say, oh, I liked it when you did this, or I saw this and that was really interesting and I thought it was great. And when schools do this like regularly and at scale, where lots and lots of teachers across the school are dropping into each other's lessons, basically what you get is this like significant culture change where all of a sudden, like teachers feel like other teachers are starting to like care more about their practice. Teaching immediately becomes less of like a solo sport, an isolated practice. And then you basically you sow the seeds of having conversations around pedagogy and curriculum, right? Because somebody's come in and said something about your teaching, and all of a sudden you've got something to talk about that's not just the kids or, what happened at the weekend. You have this kind of common ground, like initial seed to talk to people about. And just the last thing to kind of, wax on about drop-ins is, I don't know whether you saw, but there was a working paper, so like basically a research paper that hasn't gone through peer review yet, that was just published last week by, I'm just trying to grab it on the laptop now, is by a chap called Phipps or Phillips. Both names are mentioned in 2 different points in Ed working papers. And essentially, he did a study over in the US where they basically looked at, I think it was a kind of a charter school, where there were a bunch of drop-ins that happened within the school, and they tried to kind of measure the impact. And, Josh, remind me if I'm wrong here, but from memory, what they found was that essentially after an amount of time of having these unannounced drop-ins, student learning went up, student behavior went down. So I think they measured that via suspensions. And there was one other, it was like something like teachers were,
they reported better about their jobs, didn't they?
Yes, it was like increased satisfaction or something like that. So it's basically like these 3 really significant effects that you just get from this very, very simple kind of tool of just dropping into each other's lessons. And so that kind of all of this stuff, me experiencing it and then seeing the kind of research back that hunch up, and this being like the very first steps that schools can take towards instructional coaching by kind of transforming the culture and getting it ready. I think I find that stuff really exciting.
Love it. And, Doug, this question is really for you, because when most people think of Teach Like a Champion, they think of like the content of good teaching, right? Like the techniques. I'm curious, like, does Teach Like a Champion have sort of an approach for coaching? And like, how do you see the role of coaching within Teach Like a Champion?
Yeah, it's so important. I mean, I think that my colleagues and I have written a lot about coaching and maybe practice in particular. I think that when we first started doing trainings and workshops around the idea of technique, we thought that consciousness would be curative, that if you were aware of something, that would be sufficient to help you to change it. And of course, it's not that way at all. That take something really, really simple like wait time. So the research is overwhelmingly clear that the average teacher waits less than a second between the question and the first answer that he or she takes. If the teacher can slow down 3, 4, 5 seconds, the number of students who want to participate increases dramatically. The quality of answers increases dramatically. It's a home run, and it's an incredibly simple thing to do, right? You would think you would be able to say that to teachers, and suddenly every teacher would be waiting 5 or 6 seconds. But even doing something as simple as that in an incredibly complex environment, like a classroom with 30 students, when you're trying to teach a bunch of content and you're paying attention to, is David with me right now? Is he about to turn around and start distracting Kevin behind him? Are they picking up what I'm putting down about, Lord of the Flies? It's hard to change behavior in a complex environment like that. And what we realized very quickly is that you had to have a variety of things. One of the things you had to have was practice, and that coaching, you need to have practice, and you need to have reflection, and you need to have a shared vocabulary. And so coaching, I think, is often a tool for causing practice to happen. And practice can even be, Josh is my coach and we're together on a call and he says, I want you to, the first step, strangely, to me, having more wait time in my classroom is probably just Josh on a call with me, having me practice taking 5 questions that I'm going to ask for my lesson tomorrow and practice asking them slowly and glancing around the classroom and looking comfortable instead of really awkward in the moment when I'm giving students wait time, and smiling at students, and maybe even saying the question in a way that sounds thoughtful, that suggests it requires some thought, like, what are some things we learned in the first chapter, as opposed to what are some things we learned in the first chapter. There's a lot to it. And so coaching there, I think, helps me to practice it. And if those very small behaviors, like the waiting part, the phrasing, if I can embed those if those can become habit to me through practice, then I don't have to think about them when I'm teaching, and I can be thinking about other things. And I just think that given that teachers have to think about so much when they teach, the more we can use practice and coaching to embed in long-term memory. I think one of the reasons you practice something is because it's very, very important. And I think that's a key part of what Steplab does. But one of the other reasons you practice something is because you don't want to think about it when you're performing. You want it to become automatic, and you want to be thinking about other things. And I think that those are things that coaching can help teachers to do. They're basically stacking a set of habits. Sorry for going on long here, but Peps gave the analogy of learning to drive. I love teaching my kids to drive. I have 3 kids. I'm teaching my 3rd daughter right now to drive. And one of the things that I do, first of all, I teach them to drive manual transmission, because interestingly, I think there's some analogies here. I think it's really important because manual transmission causes you to think about what you're doing more than automatic transmission. You have to be conscious about the decisions that you're making, and I think that's really important. But I started with my kids. They would sit in the passenger seat when I'm driving them to football practice or something like that, and I would make them do the shifting while I drove, just so that they could get automatic with where are the gears? How can I find them? What happens when I can't quite find second versus fourth? So that when they then sat in the driver's seat, when they got their learner permit, that behavior would be less intensive to working memory for them, and they could think about the clutch, or they could think about looking, about where their eyes go and things like that. So I think one of the things that's so beautiful about Steplab is that it breaks down a lot of the things we're trying to do and builds them up again through automatizing basic behaviors, so that one, I can practice before I go. I don't go into my classroom and try something new and fail, which is brutal psychologically in front of 30 kids. And causes me to doubt whether professional development can help me. But if I practice and I build up my skills with a coach before I walk into the classroom, then I walk into the classroom and I try to do wait time or cold calling, and it feels successful to me, then I'm invested in the process of professional development, and I feel successful in front. I feel successful in front of 30 kids. Is still an audience, and 37th graders can be a brutal audience to fail in front of, and I just think that that's a hidden part of teaching that we don't always talk about as much as we could.
And we know from the habit literature that basically whenever we find ourselves under situations of pressure or stress at all, we are much more prone to just reverting back to previous habits. So, and the classroom is basically just a big pressure cooker, right? And which gets much, much worse whenever you're trying out something new. And so the whole, like, basically classroom environment is constructed to work against you, trying to, put new habits or put new techniques into action in the moment.
You would never walk out on center court at Wimbledon and be like, I have a new backhand, I'm going to try it today, right? You would have done it, 1,000 times before you walked out on center court. That, any performance profession implies rehearsal and practice. Teaching is a performance profession.
And someone would have helped you to integrate it into your wider practice. And I think that's when to
do it and when not to do it. Those are important decisions about your new backhand.
And how it relates to the move before and the move after. Doug, you said hard to change behavior in a complex environment. And teaching is any kind of thing you do in the classroom is the nexus of a bunch of really difficult stuff. You're dealing with some subject content, which is probably really difficult. You're dealing with some students and they're interacting with the subject content. And then you're just a big complex map of the ways you've taught in the past and what you want out of the lesson. And then expecting someone to be yeah, I told you about wait time, do it, without helping them to integrate it with all the things I just mentioned is there's no wonder that it doesn't work for people without the kind of implementation support that kind of coaching provides, or a really good rehearsal-based PD provides. Just before I move on, to shout out the other Teach Like a Champion book, which people actually have to read, is Practice Perfect, which doesn't get mentioned enough, but I learned so much about how to lead PD and really how to build Steplab from this book.
Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. Practice with feedback makes perfect. How is that, Doug?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I've rehearsed that, obviously. One of my favorite all-time ideas.
I think what everybody here is saying is quite right. I think rehearsal is sometimes the missing piece of coaching. Maybe it's one of the more contentious parts, right? When you're talking about coaching a teacher, you just want to have maybe a kind of a light discussion and move on. That could be an approach, right? But the rehearsal really involves a bit of people don't like to say it, but a bit of role playing, right? A bit of practice without an audience often, to kind of get rid of that extra cognitive load, to focus on the one technique. Before we're going to go talk about video in a sec, but how does the coaching engine address rehearsal, Josh?
Well, keen to get Doug's thoughts on rehearsal as well. But so I once saw some coaching happen, and it was on wait time and cold call. And I saw the coach say to the teacher, okay, so we've talked about cold call. I've shown you what cold call looks like. What I'm going to get you to do is just make up some questions. Doesn't matter what they're about. And the teacher's like, and the coach said, well, don't worry. Just ask me what I had for dinner yesterday. Right, up you get, action. And then I watched this poor teacher being like, what did you have for dinner, Doug? And I was like, I felt like I wanted to jump out the window. But the second thing is it helped me to have an important realization, which is the reason I think why role play, quote unquote, is super unpopular is because it's often not prefaced by planning. It's pretty simple, but if you just say what lesson are you going to make this change in? What is what are you going to be teaching that lesson? Okay, what are the key things you want to ask questions about? Script 5 questions. When in the lesson are you going to deliver these questions? Open up that moment on your PowerPoint. Okay, up you get. Let's rehearse that. You turn something which feels felt fake and awkward into something that feels just useful and real. And so I feel it's such a simple tweak, but that's one of the things we do on Steplab, and one of the things which Doug's team and I worked on is writing these kind of rehearsal tasks for each of the Teach Like a Champion steps, which is basically helping a coach who probably doesn't know how to do it automatically to have the practical knowledge to set up a role play with the planning that needs to come before it to make it feel real.
Those brilliant. And maybe I think that you are describing a really important and subtle distinction in what happens in practice, which is the difference between rehearsal and role play. When I role play, I'm somebody else. right? And when I am rehearsing, I am me preparing for performance. And so good practice should be adaptive. I'll come to that in a second. And adaptive rehearsal embedded in reality, which is your point about, am I practicing the questions that I'm actually going to ask in my maths class next week? Or am I practicing, asking you how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich? The first of those is going to help me. I'm actually embedding in working memory the questions I'm actually going to ask. They're going to help me to ask the right questions in the right way. That's going to be better for me. So making the practice look as close as possible to what the performance environment is going to look like is really important. But I think the difference between rehearsal and role play is when I'm rehearsing, I'm pretending to be me. And so one of the things I'm trying to do is find my own voice, right? There are a lot of different ways that you could cold call. And I want to adapt the cold call to the question, like the way that I ask the cold call should reflect the question that I'm asking. Tell me one of the causes of the American Civil War. Like, imagine the difference between this. Zach, tell me one of the important causes of this, or even better, tell me, I'm making a mistake in my practice right there. Zach, tell me what one of the important causes of the American Civil War. Fine. Next round. Tell me what one of the important causes of the American Civil War might be. Pause. Sound reflective. Give students some time. Zach, could you start us off? Right? It's a hard question. I want to imply that you're just going to begin answering the question. I want to say the name Zach after the question to cause everyone to think. But I'm also my style of doing that might be different from Josh's or yours, Zach. And so one of the things that I'm doing when I'm practicing is also finding my own tone of voice. Every teacher is different, right? And so I'm finding my own personal style so that I feel comfortable. I sound like me when I walk out into the classroom and do it in front of kids, because kids will tell very quickly if you're not your sort of authentic self. So rehearsal is me practicing being me in front of my classroom on Tuesday, as opposed to what happens when we often start practicing in a workshop is people will they'll kind of be funny and they'll pretend to be some other teacher and they'll kind of be half acting and of course that's a little bit psychologically safe for the first time you do it, but it's not going to help you as much as rehearsal embedded in content. And then maybe just one more thing that I think is really important about practice is that it should be adaptive. So one of the major changes that we've made to our workshops recently is when we model practice for people. So let's say I'm practicing using cold call. We now model twice. And so I would say I'm going to practice cold calling for a harder question or an easier question, or I'm going to model practicing early in my unit and right before the test. And I might even narrate that. And I'm going to make the following changes given the context because. And I think that causes people to think about how, whether, when, and why they use a technique. Because I think one of the things that can go wrong is you practice something and then so people just start to use it mechanistically and mechanically, and they don't have a really clear mental model of what they want to accomplish from a cognitive science standpoint. And so if I can ask you to great, I want you to try doing it with a student, try doing this correction of behavior with a student who corrects right away. Now try doing it with a student who's a little bit more challenging. Try doing it when you can stand next to the student and whisper it. Now try doing it across the classroom. How would you say it differently in these different contexts? I think that sort of adaptive practice is really important to helping people make implicit decisions when they try to use the technique.
Love that. I'm going to try and integrate all that into your original backhand analogy, Doug. So essentially, if you're practicing your backhand, you don't practice Roger Federer's backhand. You practice your own backhand, right? Because that'd be crazy to do somebody else's, pretend to be somebody else's. And then when you practice your backhand, you don't just practice from the back of the court, from the baseline every time. You're practicing it around the court at all different places. So you build up that kind of understanding of what makes a good backhand. There we go. Any tennis fans out there are going to be learning a lot today from Progressively Incorrect. You've got a whole new audience, Zach.
When is the first Progressively Incorrect tennis event, by the way?
Well, so we touched on rehearsal. For me, the other piece that's often missing is models for the teacher. And Steplab's got a great way of doing this that kind of fits perfectly well with what Teach Like a Champion's been done for so many years, right? Which is it has embedded in the steps, it has these videos, right? Really high quality videos filmed by our good friend Matt Finley. Many of them. I'm going to actually play a video now. Let's see if this all works out. I'm going to play a video, and of course, listeners will just get the audio, but we're going to kind of be analyzing it and looking at the teaching. And I really wanted to put Doug front and center, because actually I saw you do this at Research Ed Chile a few years ago, and I'm going there in just a few weeks, and I saw you doing this kind of live to a full auditorium of like 900 people, like analyzing video, and I kind of wanted to take some time and give some airtime towards this kind of activity. What's cool is I'm going to give you a video you may not have seen, so you gotta think on your feet. You ready? Okay.
I'm ready for the challenge.
And what I'm looking at is a step and success criteria sort of space right here on Steplab on using paired talk or turn and talk. And I've clicked on primary because Steplab has videos for both older students and younger students, right? So I've clicked on primary, being a primary teacher myself, and I'm going to go ahead and push play.
Because he'd felt her fear and injury, of course. Track up. Does this witch have a demon? Show me, don't tell me. What's the difference between a witch's demon and a human's demon? Link back to retrieval we did at the beginning of the lesson. Turn to your partner, go.
A witch's demon can go like anywhere and they don't feel any pain. But a human's demon would feel pain. And
3, 2, 1, and 0. I'm going to give a merit to Zainab and Kendrick. I heard their beautiful partner talk. It was fantastic. Merit for you for Aspire. Turn and track Sand, please. What's the difference between a witch's demon and a human's demon?
The difference between a witch's demon and a human's demon is that a witch's demon can go further without their owner, but for human's demon, they have to stay close together.
Absolutely. Merit for you for Aspire. Good job. Back to the text.
All right. What are your thoughts on that, Doug?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I have never seen that video before, and it makes me, I want it. I'm wondering why Steplab is holding out on me. So I'll just start with a couple quick thoughts, and then, we can go any direction that you want to. I like this turn and talk a lot. And so one, because the routine is really well embedded in the classroom. And I think the moment when the teacher says, turn and talk to your partner, go, essentially, and the room like crackles to life, I think that's so important because it is not only shows student engagement, but it's a peer-to-peer signal. Peps talks about this in Motivated Teaching, that my perception of a peer norm will always be the greatest influence on my behavior and motivation in the classroom. And so when the teacher has a really well installed routine like this for turn and talk, and I'm a student in that class and I hear all my classmates explode into life talking about how a witch's demon is different from a human's demon, I now think, enthusiastic, engaged participation is the norm in this classroom. That is the way for me to be a part of this community. And I think that that's powerful. I think that one of the most common ways that turn and talk goes wrong is that because it's so powerful as a routine and it feels so good as a teacher, it can be a little bit catnippy. And you can do turn and talk and not have students actually learn anything from it. It can be, it can look engaging but not cause learning. And this is an example of retrieval practice where the teacher is asking students to recall the difference between, it's a substantive question that involves retrieval of significant information. And I think that that's really important. One of the ways that if turn and talk is done without background knowledge, it's going to be weak. If it's done with background knowledge, it's going to be strong. And so that's another thing that strikes me. And I also just love I love backstopping turn and talk with a cold call. I think it holds students more accountable for what they do during the turn and talk. I think that's critical. So I would call that like stacking your techniques. It's a great thing to practice. And I also think that there's evidence to me here that this is a routine, not just for students, but for the teacher, and the routine for the teacher also frees teacher working memory. And I just think she's lovely about like noticing students who are engaged and appreciating their answers and smiling at them when she's talking about the book. And just her voice tone, for her level of interest that she intimates, suggests that she doesn't have to think a lot about the turn and talk where she's going, that it's automatic for her. And so her working memory can be focused on the relational elements of the classroom. So I think there's a lot to shine on in that turn and talk.
And that's, just to call it, that's Isla. Let's give Isla a bit of, snaps.
Go Isla.
Yeah, Rach Feltham, she's a legend, as are pretty much all the teachers there, and Tilly, who kind of leads the ship. And, quick plug, we are currently working on a 4-part Netflix-style documentary, which is actually going to be featuring Isla amongst other amazing teachers from the UK. So watch this space on that one. And I think the thing I just like to call out from that little clip is that two things. Firstly, we're seeing again here the power of rehearsal, but we're just seeing it in the classroom, right? So we've talked a lot about the importance or the power of rehearsal for teacher professional development. And here we're seeing exactly the same thing going on. Surprise, surprise, at the classroom level. As Harry Fletcher Wood is famous for banging on about, teacher learning is just learning, and we can kind of switch that round and apply it the other way around as well. And then that relationship, like you pointed out, between the turn and talk and the, what do you call it, like full stopping it with a cold call. Actually, the turn and talk provides students with an opportunity to rehearse their answer before they're questioned. And now, all of a sudden, they're going to answer with much more confidence because they've had to go at trying it out. They've had to go at rehearsal. And so it ends up building confidence as much as anything else, as much as learning. And then the final thing, which, important to call out, is that doing all of this stuff together, Doug mentioned the kind of social norm effect, but it also makes you feel like you are more part of that class because everyone is doing the same thing. It's kind of a shared ritual. So it builds a kind of sense of belonging across the class, which doesn't only help with learning, it boosts well-being as well. So there's all sorts of kind of spillover effects in action here.
Can I just pick up on two things? Sorry to geek out on this so much, but a teacher like Isla, this is all I want to talk about is how teachers like Isla do what they do. But every faith, every religion worships together. That is how they create a sense of belonging and community. You pray together, you sing together. That's a commonality of, and that is because people feel the strongest sense of belonging when they do something in common with other people and there's a way of doing it. I think that's one of the reasons why routines are so powerful in the classrooms. It creates a sense of this is how we do it. I know how it's going to work here. I'm a part of this. I think that's really true. And then just one really super nerdy thing about turn and talk. Her turn and talk is really short. And one of the phrases we talk about in Teach Like a Champion is the crest of the wave, which is if this is a rehearsal for one of the things that can happen in turn and talk is there can be misinformations, shared among students, right? That's very common. So I should remember that turn and talk is a rehearsal task where I let students work out their ideas before we discuss them as a group. And if I know that they're rehearsal, I don't want them to talk it all out. I don't want them to be bored with the conversation by the time we go whole group. I don't want them to spend half the time in their turn and talk thinking, my God, this is awkward. I've said everything I have to say about this, and now I have to sit here for 30 seconds and look at Josh. So cutting your turn and talk off a little bit too early, as opposed to letting it go a little bit too long, is so important when you think about it as a form of rehearsal, because its role is to prime the students to want to and be to have it be foremost in their mind. They're excited. Now they want to talk to the whole group about it. And so that's just, I think this gets at why video is so powerful. There's so much in that tiny detail about how to craft a classroom culture. You could study this video and watch it 20 times and still be learning more from it. And building a mental model of what, this incredibly challenging and important and decision-laden work of teaching involves.
Yeah. And I think, Zach, you pointed out at the start that the reason why you chose turn and talk is because, inevitably, like every other teaching strategy, it's at the moment it's catching some shade on X or Twitter. People are like, yeah, turn and talk's being overused. Sometimes you do turn and talk and students don't talk about the thing you want them to talk about, or sometimes it's an excuse to misbehave. But of course, that is the case with, there's no teaching strategy which is universally a good thing. To be good at turn and talk, firstly, you need to keep your turn and talk really, really crisp, as Doug says, because you want students just talking about the stuff. As Doug also says, you want to backstop your turn. You want to have actually taught something so that they have something to talk about. But I think, I don't know, what fallacy is it that just because something doesn't work in every case, it's bad? I think that's just, and we often find that's a common fallacy when people talk about teaching techniques. We
call it the silver bullet fallacy. It's not perfect, doesn't solve every problem in every situation. When I use it, it must be broken.
Right, yeah. Yeah, cold calls can be used in a way that can make students feel anxious. Therefore, all cold calls are bad. It's like
it's a powerful tool. Can I imagine a way to misuse the tool? Yes, I can. Does that mean the tool is not powerful? No, of course not. In fact, because it's powerful, right? You wouldn't go using a power drill to, like in your kitchen renovation and stab it into the pipes. That would be a misapplication. It's still a great tool.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, a little bit of a rant there on my part.
And just to go like super geek on this stuff. So talking about, Doug, you started in your introduction to TLAC 3.0, I think probably all the way through down to 1.0, you kind of talk hard about this idea of like it being a toolkit. And I think these are a set of tools that, you get good at using and you use at appropriate times for appropriate purposes. I think you're absolutely right. That's kind of how we should be thinking about these things. But 2 bits of context that you don't necessarily get from that video about Isla and the school that she works in. One, that school has, and this is similar to many of the most successful schools in the UK, actually they limit their repertoire of tools, okay? A bit like a really good carpenter, basically gets to a point in their career where they actually only use kind of a limited set of tools, but they can use them incredibly well, and they know how to combine them incredibly well. So I think it's just like a kind of quite a sophisticated concept that some schools have grasped around trying to constrain the number of tools that they use, but just use them really, really well. And then the second point, I'm keen to get any takes on this. The second point is that in those schools, the teachers will often have pretty much the same techniques or share the same tools between each other, which A, allows them to get better at them because they get to go in and see what everyone else is doing and how they're improving them. But B, we get the same effect that happened in the classroom whenever we have a shared ritual, right? If you're in a school and you're teaching in a kind of a similar way to other teachers in your school, guess what? You feel like you belong a little bit more together. And as a result, that becomes a more positive experience for you. You're more bought in, you end up more satisfied, and your well-being increases. So I just think the whole tool kit analogy is really powerful and can be deployed in multiply sophisticated ways.
I love that. And what's funny is when I show that video, which I've shown to a few different schools, because I'll talk about, for example, working memory is limited. You can only process a few things at a time. And so we've got to have some sort of solutions to that. We have to get it to kind of stick it, be sitting and bumping around and working memory a little longer. Here's some rehearsal, but of course, some turn and talks are not as good as others. I talk about this at length and everyone's nodding their head. And then I show that video and I get the same reaction, at least around here, that all the teachers go, that was just incredible. That was nothing like anything I've seen in a turn and talk, at this school or in my own practice. And it changes the entire conversation around, Zach's talking about it. Sure, everyone should do it to, this is a high bar. This is something I need to actually strive towards if I want to be really excellent.
You can't hide from video. This is one of the reasons video is so powerful. It's it's hard to explain teaching using words alone, but when you show people a video, it's picture paints 1,000 words, a video paints 1,000,000. It's a huge kind of onslaught to the senses that you can't back away and kid yourself out of. So yes, I think hugely powerful.
I love it. So I wanted to go kind of towards the end of our we're getting to the end of our meeting here. Coaching is a tricky job. I think in the US, I think we've gone past the point of this is a fad. I think it's here to stay. We're in the point of maybe implementing it better, an implementation phase. But I know in the UK, there's just a little more debate around, is this just the next big thing? So here's my question. We can start with you, Josh. What can we do to make instructional coaching more satisfying for coaches and more easily implementable, but also move the needle when it comes to student achievement?
So we talk a lot and I heard Doug say, not on this call, but on the last call we were on, that, you know, we want teachers not to be islands, right? It's like teaching shouldn't be like a solo sport. It shouldn't be an isolated practice. When a teacher's alone in their classroom, it can feel really lonely, and they're not improving because they don't have people to look at who are different to them, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I think oftentimes, and I think actually particularly in a US coaching model, coaches are definitely islands. You often have one coach or you know, at most a couple of coaches in a school, or a coach at a district, and they're just traveling between schools. And that coach is just doing this really, really difficult thing, but they're doing it, you know, on their own, and, you know, and like without loads of information about how to be better. And, you know, and I've always found that the way to help coaches do a better job is, you know, help coaches connect with each other and learn about how to be great supporters of teacher learning together, coach each other, talk about the practice of coaching, review video of coaching. Basically, I want to work towards treating coaching like Teach Like a Champion taught us to treat teaching. You know, that's kind of the thing I want to say here is, like, it should be a thing. Coaching should be a highly complex thing, and it is, but that we can break down, study the moves of, and learn to combine those moves to be the most effective coaches. So that's what I think we can do to help coaches kind of feel good about themselves. How do we help it to have impact? Look, I don't think that coaching is just kind of relationship building. And I think there have been some ways of conceiving of coaching, which is just like, the most important thing is coaching is to build a great relationship with the teacher. But importantly, the teacher is always right. What they say goes, you know, and I think that's kind of, frankly, an insult to teaching. If teaching was easy enough that someone could figure it out, and the job of the person supporting them to get better is just to like have a good relationship with them and say yes, I don't believe that teaching is a thing that's worth doing. So I think we also need to like understand that teaching is difficult, and that people are allowed to, you know, coaches are allowed to share important information and help teachers to know how to be better if they don't know themselves.
It's a bit like, imagine, you know, like coaching a brain surgeon and just being like, oh, what do you think you should do? It's crazy, right? You know, teaching is like actually more complex than brain surgery. And so we need to like treat it as something that we need to like bring expertise to bear on if we're going to do a really good job of it. Doug, are you going to show us a video?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Can I? Is that cheating? Can you, am I able to? So I have a really beautiful video of instructional coaching. And one of the things that I think is beautiful about it is that, look, we love teachers and they're incredible problem solvers. And we want to one of the most important things we can do for teachers is make them successful so they love their work and they keep doing it, right? But that doesn't mean there isn't science and there isn't knowledge about like what works, like things work better than others, right? You know, I think I was chatting with a friend the other day about the difference. I've spent a lot of time in UK schools in the last year and a lot of time in US schools. And I'm so much more optimistic for UK schools than I am for US schools, because the level of knowledge of cognitive science is so much farther ahead that you almost can't go to a UK school now and have people not understand the importance of background knowledge, retrieval practice, cognitive load theory. Generally speaking, you show up at a US school and you talk about those things and people are like, what does that have to do with, either they've never heard of it or they're like, what does that have to do with learning styles, right? Like, so I want to I think this coaching video is so beautiful because this is the coach is named Fran Goodship, and she's coaching her colleague Delwar. They're watching video of his lesson, and the first thing that she does is they review the cognitive science that she's trying to get him to think about applying. And like, he's so happy to have her help him think about the things that he knows and how they apply to making his lesson better. And then they do a bit of practice here. So if, with apologies, I'm just going to see if I can get this to...
So the next bit is I've highlighted. It's the part of the lesson which I thought, we could work on slightly. Yeah. So when we're watching this, what I want you to look at is the questioning that you pose before you talk to your partner. Okay. And before we look at it, I just thought if we refer back to a piece of research or evidence before we watch it, it might help you understand why this is an area of development. So with Rosenshine, he says, as we know, teach in small steps and our working memory is small.
Yeah.
And if students are presented with too much information at once, their brain can suffer from more cognitive overload. So we know that. So information can become forgotten. Yeah. So I just wanted to watch this section and just see, bearing that in mind, is there a way you could have improved this section of the lesson?
Okay, I've got it already. Just stop it. I remember it now. It's cognitive overload in terms of the amount of questions that I'm asking. So I think even when I was doing that, actually, it's funny you're saying that now, actually, because even when I was doing that, and because I knew I was recording this, and I thought, I shouldn't have done that, because even for me, it was a bit too much. And I was like,
there's more we can keep watching it. They practice at the end, but so. Well, I'll let you guys. I think there's plenty to talk about there. So maybe Josh, you want to jump in first?
Oh yeah, I mean, firstly, I just love watching stuff like that. Such a brilliant moment. Don't need to see anymore.
And before Josh, just to point out here, like, people are listening to us, we're watching a video of people who are watching a video. This is like a dream within a dream, 4 levels deep. Amazing, Zach. Pinnacle of aggressively incorrect.
So I think that was the perfect balance, right? Because Delwar and Fran. So Fran isn't just doing what some coaches do, which is just like, you need to do this. Let's do this, right? So she didn't just give him the answer, but she also didn't just say, like, what do you need to fix? The genius move there is she supplied him with some important information, which he can use to think with. But, because we know when we teach students, we don't just bombard students with a load of information and then lesson's over. There's some information. There's a task where the students have to process that information, and then they do some thinking and some learning happens. So she introduced some important information. She gave him, the lesson to apply that information to. It wasn't too much information. It's just the right amount. She probably already knew that he had lots of the cognitive, he already has loads of the mental models required. She knows him. She's been his coach for a while. He does the sums in his head. And what pops out is like some real authentic learning. It wasn't really directive and telly. It wasn't super open. It was just the perfect recipe that Delwar needed to improve. And I think that's a beautiful thing to watch.
Yeah, lovely video. Great video, Doug. Really just so much in that. So deft, so expertise. So expert, sorry, that's the right word.
And I'm always looking at the reaction of the coachee. I'm seeing how have just the small little kind of body language towards the coach. And when he said stop the video, I've got it. Stop it right there. That we all laughed behind the mics because there was so much comfort and warmth there, and he didn't need to hear any more because he was sort of facing his own like micro moment of failure in that classroom. But he's like, I got it. Let's talk about it, right? And I think that is the start of some real change and real professional fulfillment.
He's happy. He feels honored, right? He's like, I got it, man. I see now. Like he wants to be successful, and he knows how to apply the science. He's smart. When he says stop the video, it's like, it's the most. It's a really you can't quite get it unless you see it. But how excited he is to have made this recognition about himself.
Yeah, I
love it.
Video.
Well, Doug, you've got a hard stop here at the end of the hour. So feel free to, if you need to take off. There's just one more thing, and that's just a kind of a big announcement. And that's the announcement of the Teach Like a Champion and Steplab partnership, that is happening.
Marriage. I think it's a marriage, is it?
Yeah. Who'd like to speak to what we're talking about? Maybe Peps.
Best man speech. Yeah, basically, I think anyone who's been listening for the last 50 minutes or so will get just how aligned we are as organizations. We care deeply and passionately about helping to give kids the best deal possible, and we achieve that by helping teachers to have the best deal possible when it comes to having a great job and being really effective at their job. And so it just kind of makes a lot of sense, really. There have been an increasing number of schools who have either been coming to Doug or coming to Josh to say, we're using Steplab, but we really want to integrate TLAC, or we're already using TLAC. Is Steplab going to work for that? And so it just makes sense for us to basically make it easy for those schools to kind of like use both of these frameworks and like supercharge their professional development as much as possible. So that's the announcement. Makes sense. I think TLAC steps, Josh, are live on Steplab. Is that right?
Yep. It's modeled on the content of TLAC 3.0. There's just so many. It's like the greatest repository of fantastic videos of expert teachers. Like, there's just so much stuff, man. Like, one step sometimes has 6 videos. It's just, there's a wealth of fantastic video, and we're super excited. So basically, yeah, like if you work with Steplab and you want it, just give us a shout, and we're ready to go.
I'm super excited about the marriage also, but I just want to say, unless someone sends me that Isla Turn and Talk video in the next 48 hours, the marriage is off.
Divorce. Ultimatum. Yeah. All right, Josh, get a sense.
And with that, thank you everybody for coming on the show, and thank you listeners for tuning in once again to Progressively Incorrect. I'm going to keep on pumping out these podcast episodes on a weekly basis. Really appreciate all of your support. Take care.
Thanks everybody. See you later.
See you later.
Thanks you guys. See you soon.